that's number 36, the first etude there this year. The first thing that I want to mention is exactly what Dr. Lovano mentioned in the performance guide, which is the musical instruction there. So Mr. Height put in fastoso or pompous at the beginning, but she suggested thinking it doesn't have to necessarily be that way, be pompous, and I totally agree. I think if we think of this being lighter, more lifted, you know, if you imagine a conductor using small gestures lifting up off the ictus, and just keep everything very light, I think it's going to help it musically, and I also think it's going to help it stay light and it won't get heavy and maybe increase tension while we're playing it. So absolutely, I think if you can think of this in a lighter way, a more carefree way, I think that that's going to help in this particular etude. Obviously, the big thing in here is the octaves, right? So it seems like octaves are the theme this year. And when we have these octaves, you know, there's lots of different ways to practice these. One way that's particularly effective for me is to play them in dotted rhythms. I'm sure many of you have done this. So for example, at measure 38, if I play, and then reverse that, okay, that works pretty well for me. The other thing is all of these octaves are too slurred. So we want to make them, when we have slurs meeting slurs, we want to make these full value. And in fact, at measure 38, the instruction there is actually sostenuto, right? Sustain. So we want to keep them full value, very full 16th note. And not allow spaces to get in between the slurs like that. Okay, we don't want to be clipping them. So sostenuto, sustained, full value. One other thing about the octaves, especially, for example, at 38, some of you may have run into, you know, when you're playing octaves, you get something like this. Right, you get that low note, that blip in there. Why is that happening? Well, it's happening because the register key is late, all right? So when we play C to C, for example, if our right hand fingers get down ahead of the register key, then we're going to get the low F. We're going to get the shallow note, right? That's all that is, the shallow F. So what I would recommend is that you think of getting your thumb onto the register key faster. In fact, ahead of your right hand fingers. Not even at the same time. Think of the register key as being slightly, a split second ahead of your right hand fingers coming down. Okay? Get the register key down earlier, faster. Fool around with that and see if that helps you, okay? Two things regarding fingerings. So measure 35, we have that high F. I would recommend playing the high F long. So the long F. So long F is thumb register, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the C sharp, G sharp key here, okay? That's long F. It's not as resistant, comes out super easily, speaks really well, and it does not utilize our right hand pinky, which is great because the next note is the low F. So we've got to go down to that low F. So we have our right hand pinky free. So I would really recommend trying long F there. Again, it's thumb register, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and the C sharp, G sharp key over here. That's long F, okay? You can use regular F, but I think long F is going to be more successful for you in the long run. And the other place Dr. Lovano already mentions in the performance guide, which is over at measure 72. It's the last note in 72, so the high D sharp, okay? And she recommends fingering that high D sharp, 2, 3, ring finger in the right hand, pinky. Absolutely, that's the fingering we need to use there, right? So normally we would finger D sharp, high D sharp like this, but because we're coming from the 4th line D sharp and slurring up in that octave, we can't get up onto that chromatic key. So we're going to use the ring finger and the pinky there, all right? All right, definitely. And that is superior to the middle finger. I've seen many students will use the middle finger for the D sharp, but listen to the difference there. The middle finger is a lot flatter, right? And we can't really get away with that middle finger D sharp unless it's just a super fast passage, maybe a C sharp to D sharp trill, something like that. But in this case, we're absolutely going to use that alternate D sharp like that, okay? Now the next note is a high E. So, and I would play that high E without this E flat key. Just thumb register 2, 3 in the left hand, so that we can jump down to the low E on the right, okay, and use your right hand pinky for that. So I would just get off of that, play high E with 2, 3, jump down to the low E, because then we've got to go up to a G sharp with your left hand pinky, okay? So it's going to look like. Okay, so that's what I would recommend there. Now, when we get to that G sharp trill and the F sharp grace note, practice these slow. I would start maybe practice them like, and practice getting down to the F sharp and coming off of the G sharp key. Because if we leave the G sharp key down while we're trying to go to the F sharp, then you get, right? So you got to practice getting to the F sharp and off of the G sharp key, that timing there. So I would do, you know, a bunch of times, and then you can put in the G sharp grace note. Okay, that's how I would approach that, and doing it slowly in that spot right there. That's a tricky passage at tempo, no matter what we do, but certainly, you know, start out slowly there in your practice. I think the only other thing I want to mention is just the breathing. David Height writes in lots of breath marks in here, and I think most of them are great, absolutely. You heard me add one in measure 32. This is a personal preference. So after the dotted eighth note in measure 32, the D dotted eighth note, I added in a breath there because I just didn't want to breathe at the end of the measure in measure 33. So that, and to me that makes some musical sense, all right, there. I think we can work it in, it sounds very musical, but I just didn't want to put that breath in right before I have to play all those octaves in measure 34 and 35, okay? I know it's breaking a slur, but for me, I feel like that worked a little better musically, and I think it makes some sense there. So I don't think it gets in the way or is distracting or anything like that. And then I didn't have to breathe at the end of 33 or at the end of 35. All right, I took that nice breath right there in 32 and played to the end of that phrase. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to mention. Good luck and play well.